There is no room whatsoever for renegotiation.
Well, we'll have the very latest from Brussels, from Berlin and Westminster, also this lunchtime. Police arrest a man who jumped over railings to get into the grounds of Parliament. Wages rise at their fastest rate for almost a decade. 6 migrants are rescued from a dinghy in the Channel. The bank that likes to say no. Barclays helps customers block their own cards to break addictive habits. And new evidence that even Antarctica's most stable glaciers are now melting.
And coming up later in the hour in the sport on BBC News, a big night for Liverpool and Tottenham in the Champions League. Napoli and Barcelona stand in their way.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. Theresa May has embarked on a whirlwind tour of European capitals as she tries to rescue her Brexit deal. The Prime Minister's been meeting the Dutch and German leaders amid warnings from her own backbenchers that she will need to win significant changes if her deal is ever to get through the House of Commons. Later, she'll meet the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, who's already said there is no room whatsoever for renegotiation. Here's our Europe correspondent, Damien Grammaticus.
It's something the EU may never have seen. A British Prime Minister in trouble at home, seeking help in her hour of need. First stop the Netherlands. Can she come back with anything that'll appease the seething discontent back home? At this late stage, a charm offensive may not be enough to secure real changes to the deal on offer. All the Dutch Prime Minister would say was that their breakfast had been useful. From there, it was on to her next stop. At every turn, the Prime Minister appears stuck. Political gridlock at home, and here in Berlin, even her car door refused to open. Her fundamental problem, though, she's agreed the deal must have a backstop to avoid border controls ever returning on the island of Ireland. But Parliament doesn't like it. So the UK's junior Brexit minister was in Brussels with her new demands.
Good morning. She wants additional legal reassurances that the UK cannot be permanently trapped in the Irish backstop. That's been the issue all along, and that's the issue that's at the heart of the concerns expressed by many members of Parliament.
But EU countries say Mrs May agreed a year ago to the idea of special terms for Northern Ireland. After months of haggling and drafting, the negotiations are over.
We
have put so much time and effort into something that we in Berlin and Brussels don't want. Nobody wants the UK to leave. Now there will be further talks, but I can't imagine where we can substantially change anything. We can't reopen what have been tough negotiations, hard for the EU 27 and the UK.
Instead, the EU says it can give reassurance, perhaps a document saying ideally, hopefully, the backstop will never be used.
There is no room whatsoever for renegotiation. But, of course, there is room, if used intelligently, is room enough to give further clarifications and further interpretations without opening the withdrawal agreement.
Meeting Mr Juncker will be last item today on the Prime Minister's whistle-stop tour. In Brussels, they're already preparing for this week's summit of EU leaders. They'll try to help Mrs May in her predicament, but won't ride to her rescue. Damien Grammaticus, BBC News, Brussels.
Well, the Prime Minister is currently in Berlin. Let's go there and join our correspondent Jenny Hill. Jenny, what, if anything, can Angela Merkel offer Theresa May?
Not a great deal, I think, and commentators will no doubt imbue those scenes outside the Chancellery with heavy symbolism as Theresa May was momentarily unable to get out of her car to greet Mrs Merkel, who was stood on the red carpet waiting for her. The two women did embrace warmly. Mrs Merkel's going to give the British Prime Minister some lunch, we understand. And I gather that on the table are talks about possible assurances over the backstop. It's all very wishy-washy. My understanding is that there is nothing concrete on an agenda for the two women to discuss. And I suppose that's because when you talk behind the scenes to people who've been dealing with Brexit here in Berlin, for example, a government source I spoke to last week, you get the same kind of answer. This chap said to me, you know, we've done our bit, we think. We've tried to give Britain what it wanted. We've negotiated. We've come up with a deal. As far as we're concerned, it's game over. There is very little enthusiasm here in Berlin for Mrs Merkel to begin offering any kind of concessions. And of course, Mrs Merkel would herself say, well, it's up to the EU as a whole to negotiate those concessions. But there is really no appetite for that whatsoever here. What there is a great deal of concern about the possibility now of a no-deal Brexit. Business in Germany is really worried about that. The government is starting to try and prepare for that. But perhaps it's best summed up in the words of the German Europe Minister, who said this afternoon, I hope they'll wish each other, meaning Mrs May and Mrs Merkel, a Merry Christmas, because that's all there is to talk about today.
All right, Jenny, thank you very much indeed. Jenny Hill there in Berlin. Well, here, some Conservative backbenchers have renewed their demands for Mrs May to step down or face a leadership challenge. Opposition parties have called on Labour to force a vote of no confidence in the government. But Labour says now is not the right time. Downing Street says the Prime Minister will take her Brexit deal back to the Commons for MPs to vote on it before January the 21st. Let's go to our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, who's at Westminster. So, Norman, yeah, a deadline really of January the 21st. The Prime Minister has a little bit of breathing space.
A little bit, but really Mrs May doesn't have many cards left to play. The only two she's really got are time and fear. Time in the sense that Mrs May seems to be running the clock down to Brexit Day, because although Number 10 say the meaningful vote will be held before January the 21st, the chances are it may not be held until the 2nd or 3rd week of January, which would only leave 8 weeks till we actually quit the EU. Not enough time, really, for Mrs May's critics to fashion a plan B, an alternative strategy, which is when Mrs May can play the fear card. The fear for MPs is that if then they vote down Mrs May's deal, then the only other choices around could well be either no deal or no Brexit. And the hope of Team May will be Brexiteers will be shying away from possibly losing Brexit, and so will gravitate towards a deal, and former Remainers will want to avoid no deal and so might back her deal. So this morning, it seemed to me, cabinet ministers, after the sort of travails and trauma of yesterday, were sounding a little bit more upbeat. Here, Amber Rudd, returning from the gym, I think.
Prime Minister's got my full support, as she has the cabinet, to try and improve the withdrawal agreement so that we can get this agreement through Parliament. It's really important that we deliver on what people have asked us to do. We have one deal, it's on the table. I really hope we can get it through Parliament.
But she's not going to get any improvements, is she, really?
Don't be a pessimist. Let's wait and see. She's putting everything she's got into this, and I think she deserves our full support for trying to do that.
But the danger in playing the time card is you give an opening for your critics to move against you, and the signs are Tory Brexiteers are trying to renew their efforts to oust Mrs May in the belief that she cannot and will not strike a better deal, that she will go to Brussels, she'll come back with some warm words, some soft things and scented candles around her deal to make it look a bit nicer, but fundamentally it'll be the same deal. And so this morning we heard from Steve Baker, one of the leading Brexiteers, in effect telling Tory MPs to get back to their desks, start writing those letters demanding a contest.
This vote being deferred is a sign that the deal was simply too bad to put before Parliament. It was going to fail, and by a considerable margin. So what I want to happen today, I'm afraid, is for colleagues to wake up to the reality that Theresa May can only lead us to failure, and therefore with great sadness people need to put their letters of no confidence in her to Sir Graham Brady, and we need to change Prime Minister.
Ben, I don't know if you ever watched the children's programme Stingray when you were a nipper, but they had the famous catch line at the start of Stingray: anything can happen in the next half an hour. Feels a bit like that with Brexit sometimes.
All right, Norman, thank you very much indeed. Norman Smith, our assistant political editor. Well, as we've been hearing, the question of preventing a new physical border in Ireland with the so-called backstop is perhaps the most controversial part of the Prime Minister's deal with Brussels. The Democratic Unionist Party says the withdrawal agreement leaves Northern Ireland following different rules from the rest of the United Kingdom. But some parties in Northern Ireland want the insurance policy of the backstop, and businesses there are keen to avoid new barriers to trade. Here's our Ireland correspondent, Chris Page.
It's difficult to tell where it is, but it's easy to see how it's affected the Brexit process. The Irish border has been the most difficult issue for negotiators to resolve. The sticking point is the backstop, an arrangement to ensure there'll be no checks on the land frontier, even if trade talks aren't successful. So under the backstop, there'd be some checks on goods coming across the Irish Sea from Great Britain into Northern Ireland, because this part of the UK would continue to follow rules of the EU single market. A number of MPs argue that would mean the United Kingdom wouldn't be so united. That's one of the main reasons why this deal has run into so much political trouble. Whether they transport products by land, sea or air, businesses say they need the uncertainty to end. The boss of this haulage firm says the lack of clarity is crippling.
The politicians have displayed themselves in a very poor light. And at this moment in time, our confidence in them as decision makers is at an all-time low. Yeah, that we run a business, and if we run a business as they run Parliament, we build a business.
Most political parties here opposed Brexit, so did 56% of voters in the referendum. 4 parties who campaigned to remain have come together with the joint message of bank the backstop. They say the Prime Minister should protect it, no matter what happens now.
She's been sent off now in search of unicorn Brexit, which doesn't exist, and we all have to wait with the continuing uncertainty and instability.
So should the EU soften its position on the backstop, because some would say that would make a deal more reachable?
People are not recognising that the EU are there to negotiate for them, not for us. The UK government is there to put our case.
But Northern Ireland's biggest party has a different slogan: bin the backstop. The Democratic Unionists, whose 10 MPs keep Theresa May in power, say she has to radically change her strategy.
This is a Prime Minister who just seems to find a brick wall and beat her head against it. She did the same last week with the legal opinion. She, up to the last minute, she resisted it, got a bloody nose as a result from Parliament, and then gave in. And she seems to be doing the same again.
The disagreements, debates and disputes have been going on for 2.5 years, but this border is still the biggest barrier on the road to Brexit. Chris Page, BBC News, Belfast.
So, what are Theresa May's options now, and what could her opponents in Parliament do to try to control events? Here's our reality check correspondent, Chris Morris.
Well, there was supposed to be a vote in Parliament today, but now, as we all know, there isn't one, and this is where we've got to. Theresa May is talking to individual EU leaders to find out how or if they may be able to help. Later this week, on Thursday and Friday, there's an already scheduled summit of all EU leaders, and Brexit is back on the agenda. So the big question: will the EU agree to tweak the deal in a way that will help the Prime Minister get it through the House of Commons? Changing the legally binding withdrawal agreement itself looks extremely unlikely, but maybe additional promises could be made. A formal declaration or statement saying that no one intends that the Irish backstop should ever come into effect. Tweaks to the non-binding political declaration on future relations are also a possibility. Will it be enough? Well, if there was a delayed vote in Parliament, either before or probably after Christmas, out. And if the deal was approved, which still looks like a big ask, then the withdrawal agreement would have to be turned into UK law and ratified by the European Parliament as well. But it means we'd likely be heading here, leaving the EU with a deal in March next year and entering a transition period. But if the deal was rejected or no vote took place, well, the default position is down there, leaving the EU with no deal at all. And the warnings about what that could mean are becoming grimmer by the day. A lot of people will try very hard to avoid it. Which leaves us with a host of potential options here, which could be filling all 3 screens within a few days. Could MPs suggest an alternative future deal, which enjoys a majority in the House of Commons? Should we expect a new Prime Minister or a new general election? Or another referendum, sending the deadlock in politics back to the people? Could that lead to no Brexit at all? All of these options are full of complications and would take time. And in truth, no one knows what's going to happen next, because Brexit has made all the old certainties disappear.
Chris Morris reporting. A man is being held by police after apparently trying to break into the grounds of Parliament. An eyewitness told the BBC the man jumped over railings before being detained. Well, our political correspondent Alex Forsyth is there for us right now. Alex, tell us what happened.
Well, reports started emerging just before midday that a man had tried to gain access to the Houses of Parliament, and then images and some video footage appeared on social media of a man apparently being detained by police just inside carriage gates behind me here. And then shortly, a while later, the Metropolitan Police issued a statement in which they said a man had been arrested by carriage gates at this location on suspicion of trespassing on a protected site. That was at around 5 to 12, who was inside the Palace of Westminster. A taser was deployed. The man, we understand, was led away in a police van, and inquiries continue. Now, security at this location was significantly stepped up after the Westminster Bridge attacks, which took place in March of last year. But the Met Scotland Yard says this incident that took place today is not being investigated by the Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Command.
Alex, thank you very much indeed. Alex Forsyth, our political correspondent. Wages are rising at their fastest pace for nearly a decade. Official figures show average weekly earnings, excluding bonuses, climbed 3.3% in the 3 months to October. The number of people in work also rose to a record high, as our economics correspondent Andy Verity reports.
This branch of an American engineering company in Telford makes precision parts for manufacturers of everything from prosthetic limbs to aircraft. It employs 400 people, and it's got 40 vacancies it's struggling to fill. If it's going to expand as quickly as it wants to, it can't skimp on wages.
Particularly in those areas where you need to have high-skilled people who are really skilled in the art and who are mastering the class. There you basically pay the upper level of a market rate. For the ones less skilled, you basically get across with market wages. However, the wages have been increasing over the last couple of years ahead of inflation.
With record numbers of people in work, a shortage of staff, both skilled and unskilled, is one reason pay is now rising 1% faster than prices.
I think we've got another really good set of figures in terms of jobs. We've got more people in employment now than ever before. The employment rate is at a record high. The rate of women in employment is at near a record high, and youth unemployment is almost halved since 2010. What's also really pleasing is for the 9th month in a row, we are seeing wages outpace inflation.
The average pay rise works out at £16 a week, taking the average pay packet to £495 a week. Now, if your glass is half full ahead of Christmas, you'll say, that's the best pay packet we've had since 2011. If your glass is half empty, though, you'll say, we're no better off than we were in 2011. Expanding companies who can no longer count on taking on new people to meet the orders coming in are being forced to find other ways to produce more. Otherwise, their growth will be held back.
What companies will need to do is invest more in capital, in machinery, and with the current uncertainties, they are more reluctant to do that, and they also need to train staff a little bit better so that they become more productive.
With benefits frozen but pay rising against inflation, the incentives to earn more are strong. Vacancies are now increasingly filled by people from stay-at-home mums or dads to pensioners who haven't previously been looking for work. Andy Verity, BBC News.
Coastguards have picked up 6 more migrants trying to cross the Channel from France on a small boat. The overloaded dinghy was spotted in the early hours of the morning by a BBC film crew on board a fishing boat. Well, since the beginning of November, at least 118 migrants have attempted to get to Britain in a similar way. Colin Campbell watched the rescue.
We spotted the inflatable dinghy at around 2 a.m, halfway across the English Channel, motoring from France to the Kent coast.
Well, the RNLI are on their way, but the boat at the moment is heading in the wrong direction. It's now heading towards Folkestone when it should be trying to make the shortest route, which is towards Dover. The water at the moment appears to be going into the back of the dinghy, but they're continuing, they're not stopping. It's a desperate race to try to get to the UK for these people. So the RNLI and the Border Force are here to rescue the migrants in their dinghy. We pursued them for about an hour. We are just 2 miles from Dover, but they're now being safely rescued. In the last 3 months, more than 100 migrants have made the treacherous crossing.
And the time is 1:20 Our top story this lunchtime. Theresa May meets the Dutch and German leaders to try to win concessions over her Brexit deal, but the President of the European Commission says there is no chance of a renegotiation.
The deal we have achieved is the best possible. It's the only deal possible. And so we cannot... There is no room whatsoever for renegotiation.
And coming up in sport on BBC News, the tribunal that could change athlete funding in the UK as Jess Varnish makes her claim for wrongful dismissal against British Cycling.
The father of the murdered British backpacker Grace Millane has visited the place where her body was found on the outskirts of Auckland. David Millane took part in a traditional Maori blessing ceremony alongside Grace's uncle and members of the New Zealand police force. A 26-year-old man has been charged with her murder. More now from our correspondent in Auckland, Hal Griffith.
A simple, spontaneous memorial for Grace. On the banks of Lake Wakatipu in New Zealand's South Island, backpackers joined local people for the first of several vigils. Among them was Joshua, a friend of Grace's brother, who planned to meet up with the 22-year-old during her travels.
I wish I was there for her and for them right now. I love her like a little sister as well. But I'm obviously glad that everyone showed so much support.
Grace disappeared on December the 1st, but what started as a missing persons inquiry became a murder investigation. A 26-year-old man from Auckland is on remand, accused of killing her. Her father David today visited the woodland near Auckland where she was found, thanking officers for their work and taking part in a Maori blessing on the damp, disturbed soil where Grace's body lay. The dense undergrowth may still hold clues over exactly how she came to be here. Officers have asked the public to help them find a shovel they believe is linked to her death.
Grace's body was found very near to here, and although it's been removed, the investigation is still very active. Police are looking for any signs of disturbance, anything that was left behind.
News of her murder has left a genuine, palpable sense of shock. People who didn't know Grace still feel a connection.
I have 2 daughters the same age, and one of my girls was backpacking just 18 months ago. And I know how I felt. I was absolutely terrified. And I just can't imagine what this poor family is going through.
New Zealanders are desperate to show Grace's family, to show the world how much they care about a daughter who died so far from home. Howard Griffith, BBC News, Auckland.
The second phase of the Grenfell Tower inquiry, examining the wider causes of the fire, has been delayed. The public inquiry heard this morning that it won't begin until next autumn at the earliest. 72 people died in the disaster in June last year. Helena Lee has this report.
It's nearly 18 months since the fire at Grenfell Tower in West London took the lives of 72 people. The public inquiry, led by Sir Martin Morbick, was set up to establish the facts around what happened. Recommendations will also be made to prevent a similar tragedy ever happening again. But the families affected have had to endure months of delays. The first phase of the inquiry is only now coming to an end. It was expected to finish by Easter. This morning, during closing statements, it emerged that further delays were likely to happen. The second phase isn't expected to now start until autumn 2019 at the earliest.
The bereaved and the survivors and the public at large
need you to make the most robust and decisive factual findings and recommendations that you can on the evidence, so that the criminal and civil liability of those responsible for the Grenfell Tower atrocity can be determined by others as soon as possible.
Rajiv Menon QC represents Bahailu Kubedi, whose flat was where the fire started.
Having heard the evidence, the inquiry must set the record straight and unequivocally declare that Mr. Kubedi bears no responsibility, directly or indirectly, for the outbreak of the fire in his kitchen, its spread, and its fatal consequences.
The second phase of the inquiry will examine the refurbishment of Grenfell Tower and if certain materials used helped the fire spread. But with that now delayed, the families for now will prepare to mark a year and a half since the disaster. Helen Ali, BBC News.
Barclays has become the first high street bank to allow its customers to block certain types of spending on their debit cards. The aim is to help people who are struggling with debt or addiction. Well, our personal finance correspondent Simon Gompertz is with me now. Interesting idea, Simon. How would it work?
Well, customers will be able to set this up over the phone or in the branch, but I think for most of them it'll be on their smartphones. So with the Barclays app they'll have a menu there which gives them the option to deselect certain categories of spending, like in supermarkets, for instance, or in pubs and restaurants, or expensive websites and premium rate phone lines, and importantly, gambling. So then those transactions wouldn't go through once they use their debit card for them. And of course, gambling's a crucial one. There are some start-up banks already offering this service, but Barclays is the first amongst the high street banks to do gambling and these other areas. How's it gone down with charities that help people with gambling addictions? Well, they've given it the thumbs up.
Well, as the charity that commissions most treatment for problem gambling in this country, we welcome this. We'd like to see it go further. We'd like to see a delay before you can turn the functionality off, and also better information about where to go for help. And certainly by the end of next year, I'd like to see all banks doing the same, but with the full functionality.
And I think we're going to see a lot more of this, not just switching off spending altogether. For instance, we could see cash limits introduced for certain sectors. So you might be able to say, I'm not going to spend more than £50 in pubs and restaurants during this month. That's the direction we're going.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. Scientists at NASA say they've detected the first significant signs of glaciers melting in East Antarctica. The region had been considered stable compared with some of the more dramatic changes elsewhere on the continent. But now satellites show that ice streams into the ocean are speeding up, threatening dramatic consequences for future sea levels. Navtesh Johal has this report.
In one of the most remarkable landscapes on Earth, change is afoot, and it's worrying scientists. It's been known for years that climate change is causing warmer ocean water in West Antarctica to eat into glaciers like this one, the giant Thwaites Glacier. But a new NASA study shows that East Antarctica, which was supposed to be stable, is now beginning to feel the impact too.
We've known for some time that parts of Antarctica are losing ice into the ocean, causing sea level rise. NASA has now reported that another 8 glaciers in a different part of Antarctica are also losing ice. This is an effect of the oceans changing in their temperature and taking warm water to the Antarctic ice sheet and causing it to melt.
The agency is going through huge numbers of satellite images to spot subtle changes in ice streams. The data shows that the surfaces of a group of glaciers in the east have dropped in height by almost 3 meters since 2008. Before then, no changes at all had been observed. NASA scientists presenting their findings in Washington, D.C. believe ocean temperatures in the region began rising in 2010. It's expected that warmer waters will continue making their way towards the east as weather patterns change. The biggest cause for concern is that sea levels around the world could rise by up to 28 meters if these glaciers keep melting. And that will have a massive impact far beyond here. Navtesh Johal, BBC News.
All right, time for a look at the weather now. Helen Willett's got the latest forecast for us.
I have indeed, Ben. Getting chillier over here for the short term, but
possibly some changes as the mild Atlantic air battles in later in the week. So at the moment, we've got that rather benign sort of feeling weather, the morning fog as we've seen here in York, replaced by some beautiful sunshine in Lincolnshire. But actually, the picture, the bigger picture across the UK, has a lot of cloud in it, especially in the west. And you can see already that Atlantic weather system is starting to push into Northern Ireland. But all the time it's pushing into high pressure, it will weaken. So it does look quite dominant, that rain here. However, it will become much weaker, that weather front, as it comes in through the night. So it's chilly in the east, and it remains chilly in the east overnight. We could still have a touch of frost under the starry skies here, but for many, with that southerly wind starting to influence areas a little bit further eastwards, it will be a little bit milder as we head towards tomorrow morning, but it will feel chilly. Now, we've got some rain, but it will tend to peter out. It starts across Northern Ireland, across Wales and the southwest of England, and that's where we'll probably see the thickest clouds, some hill fog as well. But it's this weather system waiting in the wings which will bring the changes as we head towards the weekend. So probably more cloud to start and some patches of rain here and there. But actually through the day we start to pick up an easterly breeze more, and that will return the sunshine across the eastern half of the country, and actually it'll start to push the slightly cooler air further west as well. But you can see it's a different day for parts of Wales and the southwest, where we do have a bit of brightness now. There'll be some dribs and drabs of rain, as there will across Scotland. The Highlands of Scotland again, I think, doing quite well for some brightness and some sunshine tomorrow, and it's a little less cold than today. I'm not going to say the word mild because you've still got that breeze blowing, and all the time we're starting to pick up this southeasterly breeze, particularly through the latter part of tomorrow and into tomorrow night. So pushing that weather front away westwards and bringing in cold air. So it does look like a colder night again tomorrow night, fairly widespread frost in the countryside at least. And as I say, it's because we've got this battle between the cold continental air and this milder air starting to come in from the Atlantic. It initially gets squeezed out, but by Friday, the end of Friday, we could start to see that making a return. If it does so, it'll bring some interesting weather, potentially some snow. But for Thursday, it looks colder, but brighter. I think we'll see some more sunshine on Thursday. Temperatures won't be quite as high as they will be tomorrow or indeed today, but that's because we've got the easterly breeze, so it will feel colder as well because that breeze is going to be quite a strong one. So just the first sign of that, feeling like how it'll feel out there rather than the actual number on your thermometer. But as I say then, as the high relinquishes its grip and this Atlantic air comes in, it could be that we see some snow, particularly in the north and especially on the hills. But again, that fine detail we'll keep an eye on for you. Ben.
Helen, thank you very much indeed. And a reminder of our main story this lunchtime. Theresa May has been meeting the Dutch and German leaders on a whistle-stop tour of Europe, but she is warned there's no chance of her Brexit deal being changed. That is all from the BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One now, we join the BBC's news teams where you are. Have a very good afternoon.
Hello there, you're watching BBC News. The time is 1:33. I'm Ollie Foster at the BBC Sports Centre. The Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola has spoken publicly for the first time about the alleged racist abuse that his player Raheem Sterling faced at Stamford Bridge over the weekend. Chelsea have suspended 4 supporters from attending their matches while investigations continue.
Unfortunately, it's in everywhere. That's why you have to fight and every day. You have to be tolerant zero on that issue. I appreciate what Chelsea did. What happened in my club, we should do the same. So we have to fight, but strictly for the human rights, from everything to make a better society for the future. But today we are in danger, but not here in England, in everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
Well, Guardiola's Manchester City face Hoffenheim in the Champions League tomorrow night. It's the final round of group matches. This week, Liverpool have to beat Napoli tonight to qualify for the knockout stage. They have to win 1-0 or by 2 clear goals to be sure, although if Paris Saint-Germain fail to beat Red Star Belgrade in the other group game, then any Liverpool win will do for them. Napoli, though, head to Anfield, only needing a point to reach the last 16 at Liverpool's expense. Could be a tense night.
We have to create a special atmosphere with the way we play, and we have to use that atmosphere as well. And yeah, as I said already before, I'm really looking forward to it. It's a big opportunity for us, and yeah, we will try everything to put it right.
Well, Tottenham Hotspur look to have a much tougher task. They take on Barcelona at the Nou Camp tonight. If Spurs win, then they're through. Big if, isn't it? Because they just have to match or better what Inter Milan do against PSV Eindhoven. The Italians, though, favourites in that game going on at the same time. What might make Spurs' night a little bit easier is that Barca are expected to rest players because they're already sure of going through as group winners.
The most important when play Barcelona, you know very well that the quality that they have in the squad is amazing, it's massive. Of course, different names may different or have different quality to add to the team, but I think they are going to be strong, they are going to try to win.
The former European track cycling champion Jess Varnish is appearing at her employment tribunal in Manchester. She's claiming damages for wrongful dismissal and sex discrimination after being omitted from British cycling's elite squad in 2016. Her criticism of the organisation led to the resignation of the technical director Shane Sutton, who was found to have used sexist language towards her. In what could be a landmark case potentially affecting how athletes are funded in the future, Varnish is seeking to prove that she was an employee of British cycling rather than self-employed. Well, UK Sports Chief Executive Liz Nichol is also attending the tribunal. It's expected to last all week. The US Olympic Committee has apologised to the hundreds of American athletes who were victims of sex abuse after an independent report found that they were aware of the allegations against Dr. Larry Nassar, but did nothing until they were made public. Over a year later, Nassar was jailed for life earlier this year for the abuse of over 250 athletes. The report says he acted within an ecosystem that facilitated his acts. Well, USOC's chief executive Scott Blackman resigned in February, citing ill health. Head of performance Alan Ashley was sacked yesterday. Both were accused of inaction. Well, USOC say they failed the victims, survivors and their families. And we apologise again to everyone who has been harmed. That's all the sport. Don't forget, much more on the BBC Sport website, bbc.co.uk/sport. A lot more reaction on there to the press conference given by Pep Guardiola, the Manchester City manager, today, in which he is deeply impressive, talking about societal issues and how football operates within that. It's well worth a read. But we'll be back with much more on Afternoon Live in the next hour.
Ollie Foster, thank you very much. Will you join me here in Westminster as the fallout continues to the Prime Minister's decision to delay the Commons vote on her Brexit deal? We can look at what's happening in the Commons, where MPs are due to start their emergency Brexit debate shortly. We will take you over when that gets underway. As you can see, Norman Lamb at the moment on his feet, but we'll join that as Jeremy Corbyn expected to open that emergency debate on what happened yesterday and the fallout to it. Well, a little earlier, the Labour MP and chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Yvette Cooper, asked an urgent question in the House of Commons about the duty of the government under the EU Withdrawal Act if no deal is reached by the 21st of January. In response, the Brexit Minister, Robin Walker, said the government will meet the spirit as well as the letter of the Withdrawal Act.
Put simply, in keeping with the clear intention of the EU Withdrawal Act 2018, the government will ensure that the question of whether to accept an agreement is brought back to this House before the 21st of January. If Parliament accepts that deal, we will introduce the EU Withdrawal Agreement Bill to implement the withdrawal agreement in domestic legislation. If Parliament were to reject the deal, the government will be required to make a statement on its proposed next steps and table a motion in neutral terms on that statement. Following the passage of the amendment to a Business of the House motion last week, that motion would be amendable. So it is our clear intention that this House will consider this matter before the 21st of January and have the opportunity to decide on the deal. But let me also say this clearly. In the unlikely and highly undesirable circumstances that as of the 21st of January there is no deal before the House, the government would bring a statement to the House and arrange for a debate as specified by the law. I am confident that we will have a deal that this House can support, and I hope that the statement puts the rest of the concerns of honourable members about the government's commitment to meet the spirit as well as the letter of the Withdrawal Act and to respect the will of this House.
Yvette Cooper. Well, in response, Yvette Cooper was not happy with the Minister's words, saying that written assurances from the Attorney-General are needed now.
We need written assurances from the Attorney General on the government's interpretation of the Act, and we need that assurance that even if there has a vote on this deal, even if they're still claiming that the deal applies, if there has been a no vote on the deal by the 21st of January, then the government will Section 13, subsections 7 to 11, and ensure that there is a statement and an amendable vote on its plans, including whether or not this means, and that will happen under any circumstances by the 21st of January. Now, I make no apology, Mr. Speaker, for my purpose in doing this. I already think that the 21st of January is far and departments who will already be thinking that they've got to chuck everything at preparing for no deal. But I want to stop this country careering into no deal, either by deliberate intention of the government, with all of the damaging all of this for jobs, for prosperity and for our national security, without Parliament having a say and without Parliament being able to stop that happening. Even if other members do not agree with purpose, I hope they will agree that this Parliament cannot be ignored, and that is why we need the Attorney General's written advice.
Well, let's talk to our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, who is here with me in the sunshine-bathed Westminster. Let's just talk about what Theresa May is hoping to achieve, because as the adage has been going for a long time, that clock is now really ticking.
Yeah, I suppose the only thing is whether that ticking clock is now her friend, in that if she doesn't come back till January with something, do MPs look at it and realise that there's no time for their version of Brexit, the one that they want, so another referendum or no deal? You know, that's the only thing, maybe.
I have a wonderful phrase for that, no deal chicken, what they're all playing now, and pushing that time limit.
But that really worries a lot of MPs. And what she is trying to do is to go around speaking to the leaders in the EU, the leaders in Europe and the Commission, and to say to them, look, give me something. But I don't think there's any suggestion that she's going to unlock the withdrawal agreement and start renegotiating that. It's about clarification. That's not going to be enough for most of the people over there who are unhappy, including the DUP, crucially, who just don't sound like they can be won around.
But there's a feeling of déjà vu about all this. British Prime Minister going over to Europe, saying, help me because I'm in a bit of trouble at home. We know what Europe is saying already, and we heard it again this morning. There is no sign of any give there, is there?
No, it's only if she can come back with a rewording of something which would persuade
but has no legal binding.
Yeah, but it could be enough for some Tory MPs, the ones maybe some have gone public with going against it, who want to change their mind. She needs to offer them a way of doing that. But you know, there isn't an awful lot of optimism over there from people that she's going to get anything meaningful. But again, the question is, what are the alternatives? And this has always been the issue. Alternative leader, alternative Prime Minister. The parliamentary arithmetic stays the same. How does that help without a general election? So there is a lot of talk over there from Tory MPs, and I know what you're going to say, we've heard this before, about the letters. About whether they're close to
I was going to say something along those lines. Those letters. 48, we know the number. We've been there before for sure, but we know that some more signatures have been gained on that.
I mean, it does sound like that, but as you know, it's a private issue. We don't know for sure. We know that people are telling us they've done it, but as it turned out last time, it seemed that not all of them were being totally truthful about all of that, and there was some optimism on the side of those trying to get rid of Theresa May that there were more numbers. This feels slightly different. There's real anger. I think they feel she's not going to shift her position, so now it's time to shift the person in charge.
Just a word, staying with the anger, because I think anger overshadows all this at the moment, whatever side people seem to be on, and it's reflected actually here in Westminster. It's a lot louder today. People are getting their voices on this. But the anger that John Bercow, the Speaker, expressed yesterday about, we've had effectively 4 wasted days, a lot of people venting their heart, their spleen and everything for no reason because Theresa May decided to postpone the vote. What could happen this afternoon to make that anger something that may be a problem for her?
I mean, there won't be anything in terms of parliamentary votes because Jeremy Corbyn has got this emergency vote, so a 3-hour debate, but no vote that's binding in it. And then the other issue is a confidence vote. Now, he is reluctant to do that at the moment because he just doesn't feel that there's any chance of winning it, because the DUP have said that they will support Theresa May's government in a confidence vote. The question is, can other opposition parties trigger one? Not really. They can lay it down, but it just sits on the order paper. There's no debate about all of that. So really, you can't really see how this is going to shift, apart from Theresa May coming back at at some point with the deal and finally putting it to a vote? Because in the end, she can't put it off forever, even though it does feel a bit like that at the moment.
Just a word about, well, there were loads of sirens here a while ago. There was an intruder. Nothing sinister, I was going to say, but not everybody's fear. Do we know what's happened?
Not really, apart from the fact that the police are suggesting it isn't terrorism related, that an intruder did get in, but was dealt with by the police and has been arrested and was taken away. So that was all dealt with, and we don't really know what was behind all that at the moment. But yeah, there's, people are feeling uneasy, not about that, but they're uneasy about the whole Brexit process because they feel that they're running out of time. I did speak to one senior minister yesterday who said, look, even if they come back in January and get it through, there is time to get the legislation through. But the major problem, I think, is that to get through such contentious legislation with effectively a minority government, because the DUP have said if the deal goes through, they won't support the government. So then she has lost that confidence and supply agreement, and so how does she get any of the stuff through Parliament that she needs to get through?
There's one group that is looking rather chipper at the moment, and they gave a news conference this morning, and that's the group wanting a referendum, another referendum, and you get the sense that they are feeling rather emboldened by what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think compared to where we were a few months ago, then clearly it has moved up the agenda. There's been, a lot of activity, that huge march in London. They've done a lot of big rallies. But I would still say, look at the numbers in Parliament. There's a lot of Labour MPs who do not want a second referendum. A lot of them in Leave constituencies, they just think it would be very divisive that their own constituents would say you are trying to block Brexit. Because if you look at the people supporting that idea of another referendum, some of them have been very open about the fact they don't want Brexit to happen at all. So they are, a lot of them, trying to stop Brexit. So that is a problem for many Labour MPs. There's a few Tory MPs who support it, but again, it's not a huge number. There is certainly not at the moment any clear majority for that in the House of Commons. Equally, the other alternative people have been talking about, this Norway plus option where we stay much closer in the European Economic Area. Again, there's not a huge overwhelming support for it, but I would say that is there's more Conservatives receptive to that idea.
Anybody watching us right now is seeking more than ever some sort of clarity, some sort of sense of where we are. I get a sense that we have less clue now than we have in this whole process.
Yeah, I mean, if that deal doesn't come back and can't get through, then no one knows where we are with all of that. And there are still people talking about the Prime Minister not being the Prime Minister by the end of January, because if people think, well look, she is obviously completely wedded to her deal, it's very much her vision, her interpretation of that referendum, that she felt people voted to stop freedom of movement. So that is why she's ended up where she is. She really feels strongly there needs to be this Northern Irish backstop. So because of all her red lines, that's why we've ended up with this deal. The question is, would she shift her position if it becomes very clear her deal is not able to get through?
And your voice isn't either, so I'm going to leave you there.
Move on.
Just to let you know that, looking at the House of Commons, still having a debate before that scheduled debate from Jeremy Corbyn. We'll take you there for that. As you can see, very much still going on, talking there about the use of medicinal cannabis. But let's continue with the coverage of the overriding issue here, of course, that continuing Brexit debate. Let's get the view now from Yorkshire, where businesses have been reacting to the delay to Parliament's Brexit vote. The Prime Minister, of course, cancelling the vote on the withdrawal agreement yesterday after it became clear she couldn't get it through the Commons and win the vote. But varying ideas on what should now happen continue to divide people across the county. This is Yorkshire, and we're going to hear now from BBC Look North's Spencer Stokes.
3 different businesses, 3 different views on the route Britain should now take. Firstly, farmer Rachel Hallis, who we last spoke to on a warm summer's evening in July.
If we get a good trade deal, we'll be fine. If we do not get a good trade deal and Brexit Day comes along and we fall off the so-called cliff that everybody's talking about, we have got an issue in the sheep industry.
5 months on and there is no trade deal, just a withdrawal agreement that a majority of MPs won't back.
It's time for MPs to put aside their egos, put aside any other thoughts on this. They've got to think about the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is the man and woman on the street, and I think they've just got to support her.
When it comes to fishing, the withdrawal agreement says the UK and the EU will continue to use their best endeavours to negotiate an agreement. For this Filey fisherman, that's not good enough. He'd be happy to leave without any deal.
It's taken 2.5 years so far, and we haven't heard anything for 2.5 years what kind of quota or anything we're going to get. So if it's taken 2.5 years to get out, it must take them 2 or 3 more years to find out what's happening with the quotas.
From a hard Brexit to the softest option of all. A month ago, no one had heard of Norway Plus, but this leads freight firm Backit. We'd be in the single market and the customs union, guaranteeing frictionless trade.
It's about as close as to the current situation that we have, which means that barriers to trade will be very limited. So it almost means continue as we are, as much as possible, or as close as possible.
3 possible routes forward, all quite different, but all potential outcomes on March the 29th. Spencer Stokes, BBC Look North.
Just to bring you a bit of breaking news, just hearing that Cuadrilla has announced that it's pausing gas fracking at its site after a seismic event it's describing of 1.5. That's Cuadrilla once again being forced to pause its operations following reports of seismic activity in the region. We'll of course bring you much more on that. I think at their site in Lancashire, where shale gas was restarted after years of delays and protests. It got underway a month or so ago and then had to be paused briefly then, and it would appear they're having to pause briefly once more. I'll bring you more on that as I get more detail. Well, in a moment we'll have all the business news, that's with Vishala, but first the headlines here on BBC News. Theresa May pleads with European leaders as she fights to rescue her Brexit deal. Her whistle-stop tour includes Berlin and Brussels, a day after she cancelled the vote on her withdrawal deal. But she's facing an uphill battle as the EU insists it's not possible to renegotiate. Here in Westminster, MPs will hold an emergency debate shortly on that decision to delay the Brexit vote.
Hello, I'm Charlotte Sripathma with Business News Today. Record numbers of people are in work and average earnings are at their highest level for a decade. According to new figures from the ONS, people in employment increased by 79,000 in the 3 months to October to more than 32 million. That's the highest since records began in 1971. Flooring retailer Carpetright says half-year losses have widened to £11.7 million. That's up sharply from the £0.6 million loss in the same period last year. Sales were down 12.7% over the 6-month period, but the company said there was a marked improvement. The company has been closing stores to cut losses. And Barclays Bank has launched an app that allows customers to turn off spending on certain types of goods and services. It's designed to help people who have problems with gambling or drinking. It's the first high street bank to allow its customers to use a so-called spending blocker to help vulnerable customers, particularly problem gamblers or those in serious debt. Hello, welcome to the Business News this afternoon. Lots to get through. The UK's employment rate has continued to rise over the last 3 months. Employment hit record levels thanks to an increase in full-time workers, according to the ONS. Well, unemployment also rose, but about by 20,000 to 1.38 million, blamed on a big rise in the number of men out of work. Although the total is still lower than a year ago, and real earnings are now growing faster at the same time since around the end of 2016. Well, Yael Selfin is Chief UK Economist at KPMG. She explained to us what the figures mean for business and as well for our money in our pockets.
Of course, employment rate at record high as well as inactivity rate, so the proportion of people out of work and not seeking work also at record high. And that really indicates that the labour market is red hot. Unemployment is slightly, in terms of rate, is slightly higher than what we saw in the summer, but it is still well below what we've seen earlier and below what the Bank of England considers to be a neutral rate of unemployment. So businesses are hiring and they do want labour there. What they're not doing is investing, and businesses' investment is very weak, and potentially they're using labour as a substitute at this stage. But overall, the labour market is very, very tight. Earnings are high and rising, and because inflation is falling as well, the money that we actually have to spend is higher than earlier. So households should have a little bit more room for spending over Christmas period. However, with the falling pound, we could see inflation surging a little bit ahead, and that would squeeze household real purchasing power.